Good day to you. I'm standing in the hallway of the Monroe building, and right outside my office, we have a kind of information board. That's the way I call it, but really it's serving another purpose here. This is telling people about the communication major, and it's trying to present the major in a way that makes it appealing to people. Here we have a flyer on the Queen of Cannabis who came to speak at ESU, which our department sponsored. Here we have information on holding polite discussions in today's day and age and whether that's possible. Here we have some stuff having to do with our awards banquet, our internship information, and stuff having to do with WESS radio and a couple clubs that we advise. So that is, in essence, our public relations center for the department. We're trying to be in control of the message and not let other people define communication in ways that we don't think is helpful to recruiting and educating our students. And that's our intro for today's class, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about public relations. We're heading into chapter 12, and we're taking on really a new section of the book that we started yesterday. I hope you noticed. We're moving away from individual technological developments and tracing those technological developments and how they impacted society. And what we're moving towards now are content areas or ways of operating that exist within all mass media. And we're taking on public relations today, and PR, as it has been called, sort of gets across that it doesn't always have the most noble reputation. Some people think of PR as a way of covering up bad stuff that is happening, but in fact, PR is a long-established discipline with a lot of ethical roots. And we have, in our department, a concentration in public relations that's designed with that very core in mind. Our concentration consists of several courses, and if you're interested, I'd be more than happy to talk about them with you. And we offer a class in the fall that's called Intro to Public Relations, and another one that's called The History of Public Relations. We also have a Public Relations Student Society of America chapter here at ESU, and that is a student organization. It's incorporated, and they bring in guest speakers, public relations specialists from New York City, and they perform pro bono work here on campus, and they also provide network connections for students going into the PR field. You can learn more about it on our website if you're interested. We have the curriculum for that PR concentration. So yeah, PR right there, right? So PR, even though it has that kind of that underbelly reputation in some sectors of society, PR is absolutely critical to industry, to government, and also to nonprofit organizations. It's about relating an individual or an organization to a wide variety of what are called publics. That's why it's called public relations. The public are different ways of looking at the audience that you have out there for the audience that's receiving the message from your organization. And furthermore, you have internal publics and you have external publics. So if you look at East Stroudsburg University as an organization, the external publics might be the people who live around town, who live around the campus in the town, I should say. That's why the President Welsh, every year at the beginning of the year, she has done in past years, she's walked around to neighborhoods and asked people what they think about ESU students. It's part of her PR campaign to an external public there. But then also you have internal publics, people who are members of the organization. I'm a member of ESU, you're a member, but you're a member of the student public, I'm a member of the professor public. But we both have a common interest when there is a crime, for example, that's reported on campus, and the way that that's handled by campus police also has a design to it that has public relations ideas in mind for the internal publics here. Now let's do as we always do, trace the history of in this case, the origins, not trace the origins, we're going to trace the history of public relations. And it all starts in the American Revolution, believe it or not. And you can see some of this in Philadelphia if you walk around, because Thomas Paine, who was in Philadelphia, he was a very vocal opponent of the British Crown, and he was decidedly trying to stir people up in favor of the revolution. Yeah, he's got these newsletters that he's going around handing out, and he's trying to make the case to the colonies to break from England. That's some of the first PR that came about. But public relations grew up and became an industry generally around the time period of the Industrial Revolution. There we go again, the Industrial Revolution, because as companies and bureaucracies grew and became really mammoth in their size, as opposed to the small general store on the corner, now you have a huge factory making car parts or whatever, As these companies grew, they needed to manage their images because so many things could go wrong. A person gets hurt on the job, you need to be out in front of that with public relations. And of course, caring for the person who was injured. That's part of the ethics of public relations. Now, there was some seedy public relations that took place early by a person who you may have heard about. He's in the folklore of American history, P.T. Barnum. P.T. Barnum ran a circus. And this circus would travel around all over the country. And prior to the city that they would arrive in, P.T. Barnum would write a letter to the newspaper under an anonymous name, and he would criticize the circus. And so what happens is people would end up going out to see the circus. That was it's a kind of a seedy kind of public relations because it was dishonest. And you can also say that PR is starting to move into advertising when it's starting to move into that area as well. Now, early PR was very much one-way communication. It was pretty much from the company to the consumer. And there was a name for this style of public relations. It's not used anymore, but it was called press agentry. Press agentry. That's where you're sending material out from the press to media, and there's very little opportunity for interaction. Public relations under this press agentry model is really more about building publicity than it is about managing an image. It's about building things up. Standard Oil, for example, the company that is now Chevron, was founded right here in Pennsylvania out by Erie. John Rockefeller discovered oil with Standard Oil, then it became Chevron, but Standard Oil was one of the first companies that sent out news articles as paid advertisements. Yeah, you can see that today. So if you look in a newspaper, you will see what looks like a news article, but then at the bottom it says sponsored or paid. And you can also see that on web pages. I saw an ad for an Amish fireplace that you can have inside of your house and you don't need to vent it. And then at the bottom, it looks like a news report, brand new technological invention, no vent needed, but then it's an ad at the bottom. And that's a kind of public relations. Now, when did image management start to become important to public relations? It actually was in the time of the growth of the railroads. The railroads were the first major users of PR on a mass scale. And unfortunately, they had a lot of unethical behavior going on as well. You had reporters who were being bribed to not criticize the railroad monopolies. And they were being bribed with cash and free travel across the nation. So you can say that some of the first uses of PR were, again, on this dark side. And then later, utilities and phone companies used PR for image management as well. AT&T, for example, an old company in America, the American Telegraph and Telephone Company, they required newspapers in which it ran ads to run positive articles about its actions. Required. So that's PR control. Now, this is really presenting a bad side to the field, right? It's really showing manipulation, corruption, unethical behavior, and so now you start to have a change. You have a swing the other way with the study of this discipline as an academic study and bringing it into the realm of ethics. So the first person to do this was Ivy Lee, one of the two founders of the field of study of public relations. Ivy Lee, that's his name. He's one of the two key founders. And what he did was he merged two other fields together, economics and psychology. He put these together to forge a new way of looking at public relations. And what he argued was that the public will react more strongly to symbols and phrases than rational arguments. The public will react more strongly to symbols and phrases than rational arguments. We have a lot of phrases today like "Make America Great Again" or "fake news." These are two very important phrases that have been bantered around in the media for a while. They are phrases and they grab people's attentions and present an immediate impact on the audience. Similarly, if you're driving across Pennsylvania and you're hungry and you see the Golden Arches, a symbol, and you happen to like McDonald's, you happen to like fast food, I don't usually eat that, but I know a lot of people do, and you might be stopping, that's pulling on you harder than if you had this text up there on the screen that said, burgers made with 2 beef patties and pickles and onions. That's words, right? The power lies in the symbol, and that's what Ivy Lee said. Also, Ivy Lee said, you got to put a human face on corporations. You can't just have this company out there like General Motors or Standard Oil or the Reading Railroad. You know, these are faceless corporations that don't have any humanity. You've got to have a person. You got to have a spokesperson who speaks on behalf of the company. That could be a hired person or it could be a company leader, a CEO, or chief financial officer. Also, Ivy Lee was the first person to deal with crisis management, knowing that organizations always have to be prepared for airlines. Airlines know that today a jet could go down, and they have to be ready to announce whatever their plan is, so that the company's the confidence in the company is not shattered. And in fact, Ivy Lee started to enter ethics into the picture. He said, don't hide the railroad accidents. He was saying, railroads, don't hide your accidents through bribes, but instead invite reporters to cover the accidents. And then the railroads will actually get more favorable coverage, because the reporters will be sympathetic to what the railroads have to go through to conduct their business. And he was right. Also, Ivy Lee came up with what is known as a Declaration of Principles. These are a set of principles that basically tried to gear public relations towards being honest and accurate when public relations information is supplied to the media. He said, and this is important, showing that PR still has a slight gray area to it in this time period. He said, tell the truth not so much because it's right, but because it's more effective. That was his psychology and economics blended together. Because he says tell the truth, because sooner or later the public's going to find out about it anyway. All right, so that's Ivy Lee. Now we go on to the second person who founded the field of public relations. He is the nephew of the great psychiatrist Sigmund Freud. And this person's name is Edward Bernays. Edward Bernays, Bernays. And he was the first to apply social scientific research techniques to the field of PR, which is a lot of sampling and using quantitative measures, statistics, polling, etc., to understand the public. That's what social science is all about. It's surveys, and the fields that are in social sciences include, for example, geography, sociology, history. Those are social sciences. So Edward Bernays came up with a term that he referred to as engineering consent. Engineering consent. That's what PR is trying to do, engineer consent. And what you're trying to do is when you're engineering consent is you're trying to get scientific principles across to people so that they then support the ideas that you want them to support. That's what the company's all about. So if you have a company like BP, right, British Petroleum, has a history of oil spills in the Gulf of Mexico, terrible oil spill. It's a foreign company. You can buy BP here. How's it going to overcome those two obstacles? Well, it does that by getting across the idea that it's a green oil company, if you can believe that. It even has green in its symbolism. It's trying to get across that it's naturally inclined. It's environmentally conscious. How does it do that? How does it engineer that kind of consent? Edward Bernays says you have to follow these principles. You have to, first of all, deliver news from credible or admired sources, not no names, people who already have a great reputation. Secondly, you have to manipulate people without them knowing it. What? Yeah, it sounds awful, but we're still in that time period where we're talking about human beings as if they don't have their own control over their own ideas, and this is a way of saying that manipulating people while they know it is even worse. But if you manipulate people, get them to think of something, get them to think of smoking cigarettes as good by showing a sexy person, which is what ads did in the 1940s. Even though smoking is bad, you're getting a person to do something without knowing it. Also, Edward Bernays said there has to be two-way interaction between the organization and the public. It can't just be press agentry. We're just going to put out stuff and then don't take phone calls. No, there has to be two-way interaction. We'll talk about how that takes place in the internet age on the back end of this instructor video. All right, let's talk about some time periods that were important. First is the World War I time period. That would be right around the 1910 to 1920s. And this was a period of major growth for PR. Part of the reason for that is because there was a Committee on Public Information established, a CPI Committee on Public Information. It was established by the government to build support for the war, for World War I. Yeah, the American public, can you imagine that? The government had to do public relations to get the American citizenry to support the American government's decision to send troops into World War I in Europe. That's what was going on. And a lot of what was looked at during this time period was the function of opinion leadership. Opinion leadership is where people look to people that they trust to form their opinions. Your teachers, your parents, people who are older than you, respected friends. We look to opinion leaders. Next up is the 1940s and 1950s as a time period. Also, we have a war going on here, but here PR becomes a profession. It becomes a profession in the 1940s in that universities started to offer academic degrees in public relations like ours here at ESU. And also public opinion research advanced quite a bit. The ability to survey publics and know what they're thinking. And this was prior to the internet, where we didn't have the luxury of tracking people according to their cookies. But in this time period, in the 40s and 50s, you have a lot of social scientific methods, surveying and questionnaires and statistical procedures, and that made it much easier to understand publics. Now let's move on to the business or the industry of public relations. First of all, let's start off with the three functions of PR as they are envisioned today. The first one being informing, that is sending out information to a variety of publics. The press release is a good example of that. I see a press release almost every day at ESU on a student who's doing something remarkable in a different country over the summer or has achieved a certain notoriety for their academic performance. I see those kinds of press releases. That's the first function. The second function is persuading. Persuading is trying to persuade publics to change their minds about things, wanting clean air, for example, or reducing dependency on fossil fuels. These are two public campaigns that are going on right now in the media that have persuasion as their basis. And then thirdly is integrating. Integrating is a function where you bring publics and institutions together through shared goals. So that's a very important part of public relations, because it's not just treating this industry as an entity that's all about the organization's interests or the public's interests. It's about making sure that together that they see that they have things in common. Like the university has in common with people living around here, we have in common a desire to see Crystal Street continue to grow and prosper and have more students going down there. So when a place opens up like the Tap House or the Fruit Bowl, which are two new businesses, or Jimmy's Ice Cream, then we see that, the university and the neighbors see that as a good thing, and together we're in it. So we want to talk about, what the benefits are of having an improved Crystal Street. All right, now we're going to move on to the PR process. There is a process involved in this industry. Wait, did I lose my place here? No, I didn't. Okay, so there's a process to PR in this industry. The first step of this process is research. Research is trying to figure out the problems or the issues that are facing the organization. And that is then followed up by objectives. Objectives are setting measurable objectives to address those problems. Then third is programming. Programming is planning those activities to carry out the objectives. And then fourth is evaluation. Evaluation is testing your messages, monitoring them, making sure that they are working, getting feedback from your audience. That's evaluation, so that you can change your PR for the future. And then lastly is stewardship. Stewardship is, once the PR is done, maintaining the relationships with the people that you've established the PR communication with. So the publics, maintaining those relationships takes time as well. That's what websites can help with. Let's move on to crisis communication. Now, this is a big part of public relations, and nothing tests an organization like a PR crisis. Like right now, Boeing, is it Boeing? Yeah, Boeing is having a horrific time because its MAX 757, I think is the name of that plane, has been grounded because of a couple accidents, one of them in Africa. And there's a lot of airlines, for example, Southwest Airlines, that use that airplane. So nothing tests an organization like a crisis. And the principles of crisis communication, crisis management as it's sometimes called, originally developed by Edward Bernays, but then now fleshed out through several years of study in our field, include the following. You have to be prepared with a crisis plan before it happens. Don't be developing your plan after. You have to be honest. Cover-ups, like Bernays said earlier, are worse than the original problem. Third is to apologize, and when you apologize, make sure that you mean it. Make sure that the public perceives that you mean it. There's another slippery term. Also, move quickly. Respond within minutes if you can. Otherwise, social media is banging out messages about you that you have no control of immediately. And finally, communicate with the media and your constituencies, the people who are part of your company. There's going to be the stockholders, it's going to be your clients, it's going to be your salespeople, all the different people who are part of that company. Now, PR has gone online, as all other areas of content have, so let's talk about how PR is changing in that way, and the online world, in the internet, mobile phones, laptops, they've fundamentally transformed PR because now companies can bypass traditional media, radio, TV, et cetera, to get to the people. We see the President of the United States doing that every single day with Twitter, bypassing needing to get on TV talk shows and going directly to the people. So that's what the internet allows. It allows companies to have the tools to find out what publics are saying about them, and it also allows companies to mine that data. Yeah, every time you are clicking a button, you are entering data that goes into the big data that are being sold by Facebook and all the other social media platforms to companies. And I have a friend who works for IBM, and she's spending all day long buying Facebook data on people that they can advertise IBM products to. Now, and then finally, you have the ability in today's world with the internet to get your PR to go viral. Yeah, if you have a really, really catchy campaign, and it can take off. It can be spread all over the internet, but also bad things can be spread too. All right, so now we're going to move to the relationship between PR and society and PR and government. So PR and society is kind of a tangled mess when it comes to news reporting, because anywhere from 40 to 90% of the items that you hear on television news or read about in a newspaper or hear about in a radio news report or see on the web in a news report, 40 to 90% of the ideas for those stories have come from PR releases. So that means a company has a new product, maybe it's going to be Apple, it's got a new iPhone, and wants to get that out there. And instead of just saying we're going to advertise, we're going to develop a press release that says the iPhone will now allow retina display, retina reading at 10 times the speed it did earlier. Some kind of new technological development that's billed as news, and it's put out there. And that's 40 to 90% of what we're seeing as news is coming from PR. When it comes to PR in the government, businesses work with PR firms to help shape government relations. So we have the National Rifle Association in a big building right outside the White House. Yeah, they have PR all the time going on to try and help shape White House policy and congressional laws not to curtail gun rights. So PR in the government is happening all the time. We also know that PR has been involved in political activism. The legalization of marijuana is something that would never have happened in the many states that it's happened in the United States right now without a concerted public relations effort on the part of the medical community. So we can see big changes. We've seen changes in other areas like the Occupy movement that was going on for a few years, where people trying to illustrate the inequities in income between people all across the United States. Gay marriage also benefited from public relations and changing public policy. So PR and political activism also have shown great promise and great synergy. And that's going to wrap up today's class on public relations. Have a great day.